In the 1820s, when the eastern tribes of American Indians began their migration into what is now Arkansas and Oklahoma, conflict erupted between the tribes who were already here, mainly the Osage and various eastern nations. To keep the peace and to provide protection to the new arrivals, the U.S. Army initially relied on troops stationed at Fort Smith. It soon became apparent, however, that as the number of American Indian tribes moving into the area increased, a fort would be needed that was further west of Fort Smith. To achieve that objective, Colonel Matthew Arbuckle, along with several companies from the 7th Infantry, established Fort Gibson on the Neosho or Grand River, several miles above the point that it flows into the Arkansas. Within a few years, the name was changed to Fort Gibson, and Fort Gibson became the headquarters of the 7th Infantry and the Mounted Rangers in 1832. The nation's 1st Dragoon Regiment called the fort home beginning in 1833, and in 1834 Fort Gibson was designated as headquarters of the southwestern frontier. For the massive waves of American Indians being forced to move into the region during the mid to late 1830s, Fort Gibson was often the first stop in the Indian Territory and provided a distribution point for rations and supplies. By the 1840s, the role of the fort as a protector from and for various tribes was largely over, and in 1857 the post was abandoned, with the buildings and land being turned over to the Cherokee Nation. Indian Territory experienced the destructive nature of the Civil War just as much as any other region of the country, if not more so, and the fort was reactivated in 1863. During the war, the fort became a key defensive point for the Union in the Indian Territory. The fort continued on, redesignated as a supply post until 1872, when it was reactivated to combat the rampant gangs of outlaws roaming the region. The fort remained active through the 1870s and 1880s, helping officials keep the peace and maintain order in the territories, both Oklahoma and Indian. In 1890, with the winding down of the frontier era, a military outpost in eastern Oklahoma simply was no longer needed. It was in this week of 1890 that the U.S. Army officially and for the last time abandoned Fort Gibson, the one-time bastion of peace and stability on the American frontier. This spring, the Oklahoma Historical Society announced plans to begin a $1 million renovation of the fort, replacing roofs, rotten timbers, chinking, and creating a drainage system for the fort. Today, the fort, in a mixture of rebuilt and original components, still stands. A fall encampment will take place the weekend of October 8th and 9th, with an education day on October the 8th and reenactors from the 6th Infantry Division reliving the fort during the 1846 war with Mexico.